Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is Sleepy Time out. Still very hot. Sleepy Time tea from Celestial Seasonings, which is a classic. I drink it a lot. It is just so relaxing. I was going to say it's nostalgic, but is it nostalgic if you still drink it often? I guess maybe. It's still kind of the taste reminds you of something. My taste buds are starting to improve again. They're not as good as they used to be. That was what was hit, I think, the worst from when I had COVID in December. Um, Everything else, well, besides some coughing and, kind of being tired a lot, well, I was tired anyway, so whatever. Everything else is pretty much back to normal, I guess. But, and I'm reading, so you know, things are good. So, I thought I would let you guys know what I finished in January. There was one book I left out. It was a book that title is escaping me right now, but it was kind of a self-help book about cleaning. So I just thought, it was good, but maybe if I ever do a video about books about cleaning or something, that might be good. But I thought, I think it's How to Keep House While Drowning. I think that's what it was called. It was really good. It was basically about people who are neurodivergent, who struggle with keeping their homes clean, organized, etc. It's also good just for organizing time. So it was a good book. But that's all I'm going to say about that right now. It was, like I said, a good book. But I just feel like discussing books I read mainly for just fun and enjoyment. And so I started off the year with 84 Charing Cross Road once again. Yes, Helene Hanff. In case you are new to this channel or have not watched any of my videos about Helene Hanff, this is a book about a writer who was kind of a struggling writer in the late 1940s onwards, who was looking for certain types of books, and she couldn't find them, or at least she couldn't find reasonably priced ones, etc. So she took a shot in the dark and wrote to a bookshop in London. She was a New Yorker, did I mention? And they sent her some books that were very satisfying and reasonably priced to her. So she kept up a business, but also kind of personal correspondence with this bookshop, especially one of the persons in this bookshop, for about 20 years. And so this is just a collection of letters. I know I've heard people say, oh, I read this novel. It's not a novel. It's an actual real life collection of letters. So I'm not sure. I heard somewhere that she might have changed one or two names. If that's the case, that's like the most fictional part of this book. But I love it. I find it very relaxing and cozy and a great way to start a year. And I usually read another one of her books around early January too, but I haven't done so yet this year, but that could change. But this was really enough in terms of just loving it, And one of the things of many things that I love about this book isn't just, okay, it's a book about books, which I love. I will always love that. But it is a book about books, and this is not the only one in this case, but it's a book about readers and enjoyment of reading, among other things, at a time, where the internet didn't exist. And for me, that's kind of important because sometimes you forget, and I'm not knocking anything internet related, because obviously I'm using the internet to talk about books, and I've been doing so for quite some time. But that's the whole point. It's kind of nice to see the point of view of readers who were influenced by other people, because she read books about literature from other writers and was very influenced by them, but and she probably had people that she knew and acquaintances and friends who also were interested in reading and books, but it's kind of cool just to see that sort of individual taste that I sometimes wonder when I'm having my rare crises of identity, whether I'm like, do I really want to read these books, or am I just going on the bandwagon of like a whole bunch of people who have hyped up certain books? I don't know. And I'm not knocking that again, but I'm just saying it is nice to see that mentality when it existed, and makes me kind of think a little bit of, wow, I wonder what I would have been like as a reader back then. And I can almost say that I would know, because I don't know how many years that I was a reader before I was regularly on the internet, probably a couple of decades, really. So, like regularly on the internet, besides like having work internet stuff and some email. Yeah, so I guess I could say I do get it, because I was talking in a recent video that I made about um, how I was thinking about 1993 and certain books that I was reading it back then. And honestly, I wasn't online in 93. I don't think I had an email address for another few years after that, or maybe more. I think it was like 97 or 98 that I got my first email address. So I guess I can say it, but like you almost forget when it hasn't been that way. So anyway, that's a lot of rambling about a book that I've read numerous times, but those were my thoughts at the moment. Now this is a book that I read that I probably should have read her earlier book, because I have it. I got it at Book Off, and it's a collection of essays too, but it's an earlier one. But I thought, well, it was, I don't know, I just heard about it coming out and I took it out from the library and I thought, I'll give it a shot. And it was enjoyable. I do often like collections of essays of all types. So it's like essays slash memoir almost. And this is Lauren Graham's Have I Told You This Already? I'm gonna read this. Stories I Don't Want to Forget to Remember. So you might recognize Lauren Graham if you've watched, well, a number of TV shows, but I think for me, she's especially known as Lorelai on Gilmore Girls, which is a show I've watched a lot. And it's funny because she talks about being a big reader and having always been a big reader. And it's weird that, the show Gilmore Girls is focused on a character who reads a lot, but it's not her. So it's acting. But anyway, what do you call it? It's not just about that, obviously. It's a lot about her life as an actor over the years. And sometimes in the beginning, she wasn't, as successful, and she was trying to move up and get parts. And she talks about certain beauty standards over the years, particularly one of the chapters is called Boobs of the 90s, she talks about things that I forgot about, actually, that were such a big deal back then. And I'm just kind of glad that some of those standards have changed. Actually, yeah, there are some beauty standards that have changed quite a lot, which is, I guess, good in some ways. She even talks about experiences with pets. She talks about health camps that she has been to, and most of which she didn't, have the best experiences in, but she keeps going. She talked about her father, and yes, she talks about, even her role on Gilmore Girls a little bit, so that was interesting to me. I thought it was a good, well-paced, funny, but not like side-splitting, but I just thought it was a nice, light read for myself. It had mostly happy, some moments were sad. She talked a little bit about her mother having left the family when she was quite young, and just, her thoughts on that and how sad it was, and also how her mother died kind of somewhat young, and kind of that thought of the almost juxtaposition, because she had a grandmother who died quite old, and it's a strange mix, yeah, to see how that can happen in one family. It happens quite often, I guess. But so I found some of that talk relatable, and that was good. Obviously, she talks a bit about living in New York, so that was not really relatable, because her experiences in New York aren't really the same as mine. But there were moments where I said, okay, cool. So now a cup of tea, well, at least a sip. Still quite hot. But anyway, and then of course I read, so not all these books are nonfiction, but I am still quite reading a lot of nonfiction, and I don't have a problem with that. As you probably know, I do really enjoy history and biography, and one of my favorite times to read about, because I am that kind of basic person, is the Tudor era. And Henry VIII and his 6 wives, of course, are the biggest of the one of the biggest topics of discussion of that time period, especially when you're just talking about Henry VIII's time period. Goodness sakes, I mean, 6 wives. Anyway, I was gonna say, just on a side note, because I mean, I had seen the musical on Broadway, Six, which is about the 6 wives, but just a different sort of performance, and I liked it a lot. I didn't understand, because I've known people who've seen it and didn't really know much about Tudor history, and I'm like, what are you enjoying this? Like, do you understand this? But I also don't want to be condescending, because sometimes you can find something interesting without knowing everything about it. And I don't know everything about it either, but I was thinking, just an aside point, wouldn't it be funny if someone could do like almost like a spoof of it, of Catherine Parr and her four husbands, because she had four husbands. She had two men whose names are escaping me. One, I think, had a last name of Latimer, um, and then she had Henry VIII, and then she had Thomas Seymour, which was her last, husband. Who, yeah. But anyway, I was like, I wonder what that would be like to do a musical, but based on them. It wouldn't be that interesting, probably, but someone might be able to come up with something. I was like, why not me? Why me? But anyway, um, but we're not talking about Catherine Parr today. We're talking about the other Catherine, and that is Catherine Howard, the fifth wife. And this is called Young and Damned and Fair by Gareth Russell, who wrote a really good book about Catherine Howard. I thought it was pretty balanced. There was the only thing that I could say that I wasn't enamored of, or by, enamored by, of, thereof, what to, therefore of, is that there's just a lot of names. If you've ever read First Chronicles in the Bible, it's not quite there, but it's like that, where you have to sort of keep track of a lot of names that are similar. Because again, the Tudor era had a billion Thomases, a billion Williams and Edwards and Henrys, and a lot of people whose last name are Howard, obviously. And yes, lots of Catherines, lots of Annes, lots of Janes again, because that was one of the wives' names too. Those are just some names. There are Isabellas and stuff like that. I mean, I cannot believe the names that are so similar. You have to really be able to concentrate. But thankfully, I had enough pre-knowledge to keep up with it a little bit. I would say maybe, although this is a good book, this might not be the first book of this period that you should read. Although I wouldn't say it's the last book you should read. So if this was the first one you came across and that's all you had to read, I would say, hey, yeah, why not? But I did like it because even though it's not just about her, because it has to be about the people around her, really, because we only have limited information about her life. Her, we know more about than maybe the average person of that time period, but still. We don't even know exactly when she was born. Gareth Russell comes up with a particular date that sounds about right, but and using certain evidence, certain people's wills and everything to explain why she might have been born around, I think it was 1522. I think so. That would make her slightly less tragically young, but still quite tragically young when she died. But also other things, a little information about her father, who was one of the youngest of the siblings, of the Howard siblings, of this big prestigious family that also ran into a lot of trouble, and they were also related to Anne Boleyn. So yeah, a lot of people were related in those days, I mean, really. And they all married each other, so they were definitely all related. But this particular, her father, had the name, but didn't really have the money to back him up. He was dealing with a lot of financial troubles. And he also had to struggle with the fact that when he was younger, he would, join in the jousts and everything. And how dare he wouldn't always let the king win. He would unseat Henry VIII. Even the younger Henry VIII, who was a much more reasonable, less frightening person. I mean, yeah, I mean, I know it sounds like, why would you want to do that? Let him prove himself. But he should have probably let Henry, because it seems like he was overlooked for some advances in his career that could have been quite helpful. So that was kind of funny, but so it gets a little bit also into Catherine's upbringing. I think it was her mother had died when she was pretty young, or people died so young in those days. She lived with her step-grandmother, who was the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk. So this wasn't an unusual thing to happen in those days, but her upbringing there is kind of notorious for being very just let anything happen. And that's why everybody says, well, this is why Catherine had these relationships prior to marrying Henry, and this is what got her in trouble in the first place. And so they get a little bit into what life was like there and what her education was like and what she would have learned. Even though she's not known as being the most intellectual of the wives, she also did have some interesting knowledge, including being able to dance very well, apparently. And that was a very important thing in those days. So she, in some ways, she actually would have made a really good queen. But it's just her position. So what I liked is that this writer didn't make her into an absolute tragic saint. Like, oh, everything just happened to her and it's not fair. Yes, she was treated badly by certain men and too young and, was groomed and everything. But it wasn't like she was completely naive. But it also didn't make her sound like someone who was really deserving of death either from execution. So in case you don't know anything about the Tudor wives, that is the basic thing. Henry had his first wife, he divorced, as it were, or tried to annul the marriage. The second wife, Anne Boleyn, was beheaded on trumped up charges because she definitely, well, totally, not even, totally made up charges. And that's really sad. But so then the next wife died right after childbirth sickness. And then the next wife came from another country. Henry wasn't very fond of her. They didn't hit it off, so they were sort of divorced. They had really was mostly annulled. But so by the time it got to Catherine Howard, he was a lot older. He was not in great shape. It must have been not fun to be her. It doesn't matter what you get in jewels and prestige. To be married to Henry at this point was definitely not fun at all. So it gets a little bit into like life at court and also all the things that went down, all the people that got involved in her ruin, which was, there were a number of reasons why she got in trouble. Really, the first thing was that one of her previous lovers, if you will, or possibly they think that they might have been pre-contracted, so they might have been sort of, in those days that was as good as married, kind of, and which might not have gotten them in as much trouble. This guy Francis Derham, who was just not very bright in my opinion, they may not have gotten into the kind of trouble they got into. But the problem was that this man kept trying to get a position at court, and being, putting himself in that kind of recognition would have definitely made him seem even more unpleasant to someone like Henry. How dare I not know about this, but you're also still here. So there was another man before him that had a relationship with Catherine, and he didn't get into trouble. So you see what I mean? And then there was Culpeper, which we still don't know exactly the depth of Catherine's relationship with this man who worked very close to Henry. And, whatever happened, he was executed. But he just had the simple, beheading, which isn't fun. But Francis Derham had the traitor's death, which was hanged, drawn, and quartered, which I'm not going to describe right now, but it's really, really not a great way to go. And Catherine had a regular beheading, but not as merciful as Anne Boleyn's, which was much quicker and, well, it wasn't the worst one either. But anyway, I'm not going to go into every type of execution and which one was worse. But the point being, I thought it was a really well-written biography of Catherine Howard, and I'm glad I read it. And, I wouldn't mind if I, getting a hold of a copy to read again for myself. But again, I have a lot of other things to read. And so, last but not least, I actually finished this in very early February, but I thought I'd count this for January because I read most of it in January, and I just felt like talking about it. Just a little bit, not a lot. It's just a mystery. I'm not gonna, go into crazy details. This is the book The Game is a Footnote by Vicky Delaney. It's another Sherlock Holmes bookshop mystery. I think it's like the 8th, maybe. This one is Gemma Doyle, who is kind of like the one solving mysteries. She's like the Sherlock Holmes character. She works with a baker who is like her Watson, and she even has a sister who's even more intelligent than she is and works for the government, who makes an appearance, spoiler alert, in this book. That's not really a spoiler, just saying there's an appearance. Oh, maybe it's a slight plot giveaway, but Anyway, but it was a fun mystery. It starts out, there's this house that's been in this takes place in Cape Cod, in a town that is fictional, I believe, called West London. And even though Gemma Doyle is known for owning a Sherlock Holmes related bookshop with her uncle, who never makes an appearance in person in these stories, which I don't know, I find that annoying. I just do. I always hate the mysterious person who never actually makes an appearance beyond text messages, but whatever, to each his own. She, even though she has this business, she's kind of known now for solving mysteries of some sort. So she is asked to go to this place that is an old house. It's called Scarlet House, and that was just been in the town for centuries, and now it's like a museum, old timey museum with a farm and all kinds of farm animals and stuff. And there seems to be signs of a haunting. So she is called on to sort of, you know, disprove that and make it like, yes, maybe something, there's got to be a logical explanation for it. And so in the course of this, someone dies. And now that she and other people, including her boyfriend, who is also a detective for the police, are investigating what happened, and it gets tied behind mysteries that extend to Victorian era issues. And it was kind of interesting that they brought in certain types of history. I don't want to tell you what they are going to because it would totally give away the plot. So I thought it was fun. It's consistent with a lot of the rest of the books, except someone is not editing this well, because they do not put the apostrophe, should not put an apostrophe in its where they put the apostrophe in its. I even like penciled in a correction at one point because I was so mad. I was like, who is doing this? Who is editing these books? It's such, it's a good book. Why are you not paying attention to these things? Now she has 3 animals that are kind of her pets. There's these 2 dogs. She used to have 1, now she has 2 dogs. They're fun. That's why they're in this picture. Although I don't remember them ever being in this house. And I thought, why do they have a cat in this house? Why? The cat's not going to be in this house. I was wrong. And there's a whole medical thing that happens with this cat that I saw coming, because I am very aware of certain things that you do not let your cat get into. And so I was getting really worried that there was going to be, something terrible. And I don't want to give away spoilers, but I'm just going to say that if you worry about reading about an animal dying, don't worry. So anyway, those were, so the mystery in this was solved very, well. It wasn't like this amazing, I was floored or anything like that. It was some of it was a little over the top and, suspension of disbelief, but it was fun. I'm continuing to enjoy the series. I'm not like foaming at the mouth to get the next one, but I'm just enjoying it. There was a reference to someone having a figurine from someone who worked at a library in a lighthouse. And I thought that was funny because the author has another series with a librarian in a lighthouse who solves mysteries. And I haven't gotten very far in that series. It was okay. But I just kind of like the crossover. I like when people do that, when they have people, their characters of different books in the same world. Much like my old friend Anthony Trollope, who likes to bring people in somehow, and you go, oh, wait a minute, wasn't he in this book? How? It's fun. Anyway, so that's a bit of my reading in January. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion. I have to read more because I don't have to read more, but I have so much to read, but I've been a little off my game lately. But you know what? If I enjoyed what I read, then I think it was a good month, don't you? So let me know in the comments below what you think of any of these books, if you've read any of them, if you want to read any of them, if you have any books recently that you've read that you really would like to share with me, then again, please comment below. If you like talking about any of these types of books, history, biography, essays, 84 Charing Cross Road, mysteries, etc. Someone is talking outside. Please subscribe. And that is all for now. So this is Catherine at Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and book-filled day and month.